Achewillow, Season 3, Chapter 7, Countless Secrets in These Woods. When you hear the word Hellgate, you assume some sort of enormous stone archway carved out of monolithic rock and into the shape of demons and skulls and pointed crosses. It's the sort of structure that casts a long shadow even under a noonday sun and quiets the surrounding wildlife with the silent threat of the infernal. Or maybe you picture a hole in the ground, impossibly deep and from which a warm, rhythmic breath escapes, accompanied by barely perceptive whispers. The opening would be lined with boulders marked in arcane and ancient symbols. Maybe it would be amidst the ruins of a burnt-out church, the remains of which are nearly impossible to sift from the encroaching vines and ferns attempting to retake the land. And maybe these are models of hellgates that pepper the rest of the world, secret openings into the inferno from whence demons come. However, the hellgate of Achewillow is different, if no less ominous. Not dug out of breathing earth or hewn from sacred stones, it is instead woven from the living trees of its forest. Saplings with their bark still green and their roots still fresh have been pulled and twisted together into a frame. Then branches from other trees were tied and plaited into a circle held up by the frame. If it weren't the early hours of a winter night, it might be pretty, but under no more light than that of Thomas Sinclair's flashlight, it's a terrible thing to find lost in the woods. Something about the vegetation used in the construction of the Hellgate speaks of the pain and torment that lies beyond. The still-rooted trees look to be in agony, their trunks stretched and bent and their branches knotted to hold the remains of their ilk. In human terms, this would be a doorway made of deformed and disfigured human beings, tied and woven to the limbs and bones of the dead, all for the purpose of bridging this world to the formless hell. The reverential silence is broken by the breaking of a twig under the sole of my left boot. There's no lake of fire or fields of flesh across the gate right now, only the forest beyond, wreathed in shadows and cold. From what little I understand, the proper battles have been fought and the correct rituals have been performed, and the door is now closed for another 5 months. None of that stands as any sort of guarantee that we won't run afoul of the wretched creatures that bubble forth from beyond this portal. "We should get out of here," I whisper, as if a word too loud or a breath too strong might awaken the brambles, stirring them to their unholy purpose. I fear that Thomas might fight me on this. After all, isn't this exactly the kind of thing he's been hungering for? A proper mystery to dig his nails into, assuming free-floating lights and a missing person aren't enough. To think I wanted to keep as much of Achewillow's more surreal aspects a secret from him and his podcast audience. I think that the Rubicon has been crossed on that matter. There's positively no walking back from everything Thomas Sinclair has witnessed. Short of his untimely demise, the secrets of Achewillow will be exposed to the audience of Stranger Limits. How many people is that? 1,000? 100,000? How many will pour into Achewillow during tourist season, each thirsty for their own adventure and mystery? I don't know what it is about the woven branches of the silent portal, but there's no resistance from Sinclair. No contrarian discourse or deep dive into whatever conspiracy theory this newest find brings to mind for him. All I get is a quiet nod and the slow, careful steps backwards from whence we both came. There's a trepidatious hurry to his steps, but he refuses to turn around, to move the flashlight away from the gate, or to avert his own eyes. As I was with the tone of my voice, so is he with his attention. The unspoken fear that any change in his behavior will trigger the gate. The clearing and the woven portal are both well out of sight, faded into the crowd of branches and bark before either of us dare turn away from its direction. We don't run and we don't rush. At this point, we're both too lost for that. Instead, we walk, side by side, forging a path in the forest towards what we hope to be a clearing and then some sign of civilization.
What was that?
Thomas's question shatters the silence like a record scratch. So deeply engrossed in my own fear was I that I nearly jump out of my winter coat in shock. That, I answer as I recover. That. But what am I supposed to tell him? This is a hellgate that our mayors close on the equinox. Sorry I looked spooked, but last time they did a poor job and allowed a few demons through. Of course not. So once again, I need to rely on one of the few things I loathe most in life. Lying. I don't know, but I don't want to stick around to find out. All I get in response is blessed silence. The podcaster keeps his mouth shut and keeps walking. For at least 3 paces. Maybe 5. Then he turns around. What the hell are you doing? I rush after him, unsure if I'm more worried about him disturbing the gate or getting a better look so he can speak about it on his show.
I have to go back,
he says, already short on breath.
I have to get a photo. I know a few experts who'll be able to identify this. It looks druidic to me, but this is an odd place for that kind of magic. I don't think it's in line with anything Native Americans made, but I could be wrong, and...
I grab his arm. No. My voice is firm, inimical to rebuttal.
No?
We don't know what that was or who made it and why. I get that you're curious. I really do. I am too. But no one hides their weird wicker portal that deep in the woods because they want it found. The light glowing from his hand hits his features from below, making him look like a camp counselor telling scary stories. His half-hearted smile takes on a sinister aspect that isn't anywhere near as convincing as he wants it to be.
Come on,
he says.
It's not like they're going to be hanging around this time of night, are they?
My silence comes from having no answer to give. I want to come up with something convincing that will make Thomas forget about going back and keep following me out of the forest.
Are they?
He repeats the question with far less confidence this time. The dark, the cold, and the lonely sound of our voices work on his fears, projecting them tenfold their original size onto the wall behind his eyes. But the coup de grace doesn't come from me or even from Thomas's imagination. It comes from all around us. A sound bouncing between the trees, originating from a single direction but echoed so many times as to mask its origins. Laughter. This time, Thomas is convinced.
The gate!
His hand squeezes my arm, but only for the briefest of moments. Then he's gone. I can't be sure where exactly the Hellgate was, but Thomas is running in what my best guess is the opposite direction. And I follow. In fact, I catch up. I'm no athlete, but I've got a good quarter of a century of youth that Sinclair lacks. Nor am I burdened by half a film crew's worth of equipment. My boots may not be as warm, but they're far better suited for a quick jog. I could have left Thomas far behind me, abandoned him to the forest. But he's the one with the flashlight, and besides, the laughter is not the end of the noises. Not even close. The farther from the Hellgate we think we're getting, the louder the laughter, the more other noises we can hear. Our run slows to a jog, and our jog to a walk. Soon, we're both stepping cautiously between the pines and firs, struggling to get a grasp on where the voices are coming from, if only so we can be sure we're still running away from them. It becomes so easy to imagine a scenario where our mere presence was enough to awaken the gate. Thomas would never know what happened, but I would die, fully aware that the gibbering, giggling presence that surrounds us, that hunts us through these woods, was vomited forth from some hellscape realm. I'm not sure which of us would be the lucky one in this scenario. Finally, the laughter dies out. The echoes go silent, and Thomas and I are once again left to the sound of our boots, crushing branches and the frozen forest floor. The beam of the flashlight catches my breath as it comes in ragged clouds of condensation. I can hear my heartbeat in my chest and feel it in the veins of my neck. I want to believe it's over, like maybe the sounds were harmless after all. An angry squirrel or a territorial owl, perhaps? The wind catching the needles of the evergreens. But then there's a scream. Not a human scream, something far less natural, something otherworldly. It's a high-pitched keening, like a tortured note stretched and distorted over a long, agonized second. It doesn't stop so much as fade away, lingering at a pitch too high for the human ear to perceive, but there nonetheless. Then the laughter returns, closer and more intense, followed by the mumbling and babbling of incomprehensible words. It's close, so very close.
"What are you doing?"
Thomas's panicked whisper tickles the back of my ears as I walk away from him and his flashlight. But I ignore his call, enthralled instead by the siren song of my own suspicions. A low growl shakes the ground under my feet, confirming what I think we might be up against after all. Flickers of light jostle and bounce, playing a rehearsal for a clumsy dance just beyond the next line of trees. I reach out a cold, naked hand and pull the branches of a young pine tree and, to my relief, my doubts are confirmed. Fred?
"You're early."
It's not just Fred who's there. There's Jordan and Annabelle and Eric, who looks out of breath. All are smiling and rosy-cheeked as they take a break from their preparations to greet Thomas and me. It takes me way too long to realize that, in our fright, we doubled all the way back to the clearing where they hold the Donselites. I'm embarrassed at my own terror. The laughter was Fred and his friends having some fun as they unfolded tables and unpacked their gear and drinks. The low growl is the purring of the generator they use to power the amps for the music Fred plays. And that scream? The high-pitched complaint of speakers experiencing feedback. All very human, very mundane, very safe things. Not the threat of cackling demons hot on our heels after being freed from the underworld. I expect Eric, the guy who's not my brother but looks like him, is out of breath from carrying the generator. They're all very quick to ignore us. The four of them have much still to do before the lights begin. This isn't a professional production, but everyone seems to know what they're doing. Jordan, the lanky guy dressed in black, is fishing bottles of soda and juice from a large camping backpack. Annabelle is checking her alcohol supply, casting a suspicious eye at the almost empty bottle of blue curacao. Fred looks like he's having issues with his phone, the source of his music and power. Everything is in exactly the same place as it's been on the previous nights I've been here. Even the generator is in the precise same spot. Click. Thomas is taking photos again. My knee-jerk reaction is to slap the camera away from his face, but the device he's holding up is the expensive one I confiscated 2 nights ago. The cost of replacing it stays my hand, but also, maybe documenting this isn't the worst thing in the world. Scanning the clearing, I can see how this will, in an hour or less, become the site of yet another alcohol-fueled party. Fred finally gets his music playing on the speakers, and Annabelle puts out some plastic bags to collect garbage as people finish their drinks. The only thing missing are the dancers and the lights. And Petunia. This is what gets me about the scenario. These are Petunia's friends, yet here they are, putting together a party only 2 nights after her disappearance. They smile, they laugh, they kid around, all of this oblivious to the shadow of their missing friend. Then there's the other thing.
"You can't stay here."
Thomas has put the lens cap on his camera. Whatever he needed to document, he's satisfied with. Now he's approaching Fred's table, fishing a notebook from his fanny pack and fumbling to handle a pen with his thick gloves.
"You can't have your party here,"
he repeats. Fred turns off the music and leans over his table. There's already a plastic cup at the corner, placed there by Annabelle. "What are you talking about, man?"
"You gotta move your party somewhere else, Fred. There's a thing in the woods."
He points back to me, or to my direction. I want him to shut up and not mention the Hellgate. These are Achewillow kids who dance under fairy lights. He thinks he's about to warn them by talking about a wicker portal, but there's a better chance he'll cause a stampede of the curious looking for the thrill of seeking this new thing. He should know better, too. This is his crowd. This is his listener base. The curious and the lovers of the bizarre. The Gullivers of the world who are drawn to the weird and hunger for unique experiences. Most do so vicariously through listening to Stranger Limits. They drink up the proxy cocktail he serves, but given the chance to see a UFO with their own eyes, to meet Bigfoot in the wild, to dance under the fairy lights or find a strange woven altar lost in the woods, most would jump at the chance. Hell, I'd even consider myself curious enough to crave this sort of experience. But also, I've had it already. And more. Even if Thomas and I didn't stir the Hellgate, even if Fred and his friends can't wake it either, that still leaves Mayor Byrne and Mayor Lagacé, who will most certainly not be pleased by this turn of events. Between two angry demon-slaying politicians and an open portal to the inferno, I'm not sure which I'd rather contend with. I honestly would rather avoid either scenario. I guess it's time to lie again. Hey, I join them at the table, but I don't get involved with Fred and Thomas's conversation. Do you have some water I could steal from you? I've seen this sort of scenario enough to know that if I run in, stumbling over my words and trying to contradict him, it'll just make matters that much worse. Better to let it play out. Get a drink from Annabelle. See how much of a hole Sinclair digs for himself and then apply whatever damage control is needed. Sure thing, Annabelle says, flashing me a friendly smile and pulling a plastic cup from the stack. Water or, water. She winks, probably implying she can spike my drink if I want her to, but right now, after hours of walking around in the woods and fearing the presence of demons and monsters, I'm just parched. Just some plain H2O, if that's okay? Without losing her smile, she mimes a yawn and unscrews a big bottle of filtered water. From the lack of seal cracking, I'm guessing this is tap water, and she just refills her bottles before each dance. I try to steady my hand as I take the cup from hers, the emotions of the last hour still fueling a tremor in my fingers, like a current running through my veins. What are you talking about, Tom? Fred is listening to Sinclair, but he doesn't seem alarmed by the warning. Instead, he's still fiddling with his phone. Judging by his focus, I'd say he's preparing his playlist and selecting songs. I've never been that much into music myself. Not that I don't enjoy listening, but I don't get it enough to dive deep. I don't stay up to date on bands and trends. However, I get being passionate about something, and I see it in Fred. I'm not going to say he's to music what I am to cooking and baking, but there's that fire in his eyes and that pathological need to fiddle and concentrate on it in spite of whatever social context he's in.
Miriam and I, we found a thing, like a door made of branches, like a wreath. I think there might be a cult active in these woods, and with the solstice in a few weeks and the moon waning and...
But no one is listening to Thomas, or if they are, they're doing their best to pretend otherwise.
Miriam, tell them.
I'm up. Fred is looking at me, waiting to hear from someone his age, or someone in some position of authority as owner of the Achewillow, or maybe just out of amused curiosity, if I'm going to confirm Thomas Sinclair's fears. My worries are far more complicated at the moment, and as much as I hate the proximity of the gate, I've no reason to think it's an immediate threat. So, I don't. It was probably an art installation, I lie. Someone did a sculpture with branches, and it looks spooky in the dark.
But,
Sinclair insists.
You ran too. You were just as scared as I was.
I said it was spooky, I agree. But in hindsight, it's probably nothing. Thomas backs away, shaking his head. I doubt he's going to buy my explanation, and I don't need him to. I just need Fred and Annabelle and everyone else to worry about their party and not go investigate the woods. Sure, there might be a link between the lights and the gate, but I'd rather know more before starting a panic.
You're missing the point.
Thomas goes on.
Cults are no laughing matter, especially those who dabble in deviant left-hand path magic and...
He points and gesticulates towards the tree line, his face red and demeanor agitated.
And that art installation is exactly the kind of thing you want to stay clear from. It's one thing to indulge in a few sigils and rituals at home, light some candles and get groovy, but when you start getting together in the forest with your friends and blessed leader, and you make effigies and altars in secret, that's when stuff gets dangerous. Like waiting for the comet to take us and home castration kit's dangerous.
He's either run out of breath or out of arguments, or both. Or rather, the amused look of his audience tells him he's not getting through. I can tell what's coming, and frankly, I would rather it didn't. But Thomas isn't just some eccentric weirdo. He's not a tourist of the occult. He's the host of Stranger Limits. He's got a reputation to keep and an audience to please. More importantly, though, he's a true believer. He gives me one last look, asking for support, but I answer with a sip of my water. Like a vexed child, he balls his fists and hits his own hips in frustration. He turns around on his heels and starts making his way to the forest's edge. There's a moment of hesitation on my part. I want to try and stop him, but again, I have more important things to take care of here. Wilson said I should find a motive, and that all starts with asking people questions. Thomas turns around one last time, pointing his gloved finger in our direction.
Fine, stay here, he shouts. I'll find it again and I'll show you.
With that, he disappears between the trees, as cryptic as the Bigfoot on his business card. Mother, I hope he doesn't get lost or die, or worse. Then, from behind me, I hear the amused tone of Fred's voice.
Show us what?
It's a rhetorical question. Fred isn't that interested in what Thomas Sinclair is talking about, even less so what he's going to do about it. Not when there's still a playlist to put together and 24 people expecting a party. Then there's the lights themselves. Where are they? When do they appear? Thomas is little more than an afterthought to Fred. I understand that. It's the rest of his priorities I don't get. He should be consumed with worry, yes, but about Petunia, not putting together the perfect set. Did I just read the situation wrong? I thought the two of them were close, good friends at least, probably more. Or am I just that out of touch with people my own age that I don't get the dynamics? If one of my friends went missing, I'd be chewing my nails off with worry. And it's not only Fred. None of them seem to give a damn. Eric is dragging another speaker into place with Jordan. Annabelle has pulled out some plastic containers filled with fruit that she's cutting into pieces. And Fred is still fiddling with his phone.
What's wrong?
Annabelle asks, popping a maraschino cherry into her mouth. I guess my eyes have been unblinkingly staring at the forest's edge for a while, and the worry must be painted in bold letters on my face. The way I'm holding the plastic cup of water to my chest also speaks loudly about my state of mind.
Still thinking about Petunia,
I answer. She's fine, Fred cuts in without so much as looking up.
You said yourself she wasn't returning your messages.
That was yesterday. He points to his phone.
This is today. Wait, she replied? She's okay?
I'm not only surprised, but a little insulted. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't her parents tell me? Or even Thomas? He would have told me if he knew. Not because of our relationship. No reason he'd trust me any more than I would him. But he doesn't strike me as the type who has an easy time shutting up. Besides, that was the whole point of coming out here. For the investigation. Or Thomas knew and pretended not to so he'd get more content for his stupid podcast.
I just said,
Fred repeats.
She's fine.
Annabelle flashes me her bright smile again, wordlessly saying, see, before going back to cutting up limes and orange wedges. Jordan and Eric are looking up from the speaker they just plugged in, thankfully without causing feedback this time, but I can't tell if it's at me or at the table of drinks.
Do her parents know she's okay?
Fred frowns but doesn't look up or answer. It's all Annabelle this time.
If she wants them to know, then she's told them.
They're worried.
Miss Dufour.
I cringe at the name, which I guess Annabelle notices.
Miriam.
She starts over.
We've still got a few things to put together. Trust me, if Fred says Pete's fine, then she's fine.
Again with the sunny smile. So comforting. She's also very diligent with how she prepares for the evening. I bet she can remember what everyone who comes to the Donselites orders too.
All right,
I agree, unconvinced.
I'll stay out of the way while you finish up.
I try to offer a smile of my own, but I remain suspicious. Or maybe I just feel bad. I hung out with Thomas Sinclair for a whole day, and for what? Nothing? And I can still see the look on Petunia's parents' faces. Whether they didn't bother informing me their daughter was back, or Pete didn't bother telling them she's safe, the situation doesn't sit well with me at all.
Hey,
Annabelle interrupts my thoughts one last time.
It's cool. Besides, you won't want to miss what happens next.
My thoughts are a mess, and I don't get the implication. What happens next? Fred's set? The incoming crowd of dancers? It's none of those. What Annabelle is referring to, of course, is the real entertainment. Neither music, drinks, or dancers. It's the light show. As if summoned by the bartender's teasing suggestion, it happens. It starts with a smell. You'd think lights would start with, well, light. Or something visual at the very least. Maybe it's the cook in me that's more sensitive to it, but the harbinger of the lights is a smell. It's the aroma of long, dry soil under the rain. It reminds me of light showers when a thunderstorm is just starting and lightning is still on the horizon. Petrichor is what I think an aspiring writer would want to call it, but that wouldn't be quite accurate either. Then there's a sort of wave, an almost palpable disturbance of the electricity in the clearing. It travels through the speakers and through Fred's phone, manifesting in a buzzing sound. It's there in the flashlights and phone lights that wink out and back in. It can be felt in our own nerves, both as a tingle under the flesh and as our hair rises on end. After that, there's a moment of calm. Not just quiet or stillness, but a tranquility that grips every one of us. It calms the wind, and it calms the night birds and critters that dare still come out in the cold. Even the trees, dead for the winter, seem to be more serene. I've just enough time to worry. The sufficient moment between two heartbeats where I can imagine a terrible creature bursting from between the firs and pines, the dead body of Thomas Sinclair crushed in its toothy maw, and the stillness and smell of wet earth replaced by a low growl and the stench of sulfur. But there's none of that. Instead, the very moonlight is what intensifies, or so I'm prone to believe. After all, the ground of the clearing gets lighter, with every frozen drop of water on every dead blade of grass twinkling. The floor at our feet becomes a star field, and from that galactic panorama, planets begin slowly materializing. Cool and dim, they form and coalesce. Even once whole, they don't stop gathering light into themselves. I see it now. The lights. They're under the soles of our boots. They grow and they glow, eventually igniting into their full form, rising like floating lanterns into the air. An entire field of colorful, formless balloons now share the space of the clearing with us. They remain still, silent, and unmoving until the music. With a touch of his finger, Fred starts the music. It's not the rapid beats and rhythm of the more intense electronic songs we're used to for these dances. Instead, it's a measured crescendo that starts as almost nothing, a whisper of sound that builds upon itself. With every change in beat, the lights move in kind. They adapt and adjust, molding their flights and formations to match the music in the clearing. I can imagine it so clearly now. Generations before this one, bringing boomboxes or even small bands to play the music of their time. The lights would have danced to rock, Motown, jazz, swing, whatever it was that the teenagers and young adults of their generations preferred. By the time the fascination wears off, I'm surrounded by a dozen dancers. They seem to have bled into the clearing, manifesting as silently and subtly as the lights did.
"What do you think?"
Annabelle asks, leaning over her table to take away my empty cup.
"It's delicious." An interesting choice of words, but I guess that works.
She mixes some cranberry juice and vodka, tossing in some cherries and affixing a wedge of lemon to the rim before handing back the cup.
"A feast for the eyes,"
I say. She looks on at the crowd and at the lights. Annabelle's been here more than a few times before. She knows these lights and the dancers that come with them. The twinkle in her eyes tells me she's reliving that first moment she witnessed what I just saw, either savoring it anew through me or having never lost that original wonder.
"Yeah,"
she agrees, wistful pleasure in her voice. The song changes again. I'm no musical expert. I think I've made that about clear, but I noticed something about the transition. I never gave Fred the credit he's due, but his movement from one piece to the next has, in the past, always felt seamless. Either by his choice of music or how he manually fades one song into the next, his sets had an organic progression that this particular jump lacks. And a quick glance tells me why. Fred's gone.
"He said he needed to use the little DJ's room,"
Annabelle explains, pouring rum and cola into a fresh cup for a fresh customer.
"I didn't feel like asking for more details."
I nod my understanding, take a sip of my drink, and go back to watching the dancers. I'm looking through the now 24 revelers. Part of me is looking for Gulliver, to see if he's found his way back to the clearing again. Part of me hoping to see Thomas Sinclair, back from his escapade to the Hellgate, preferably in one piece and not caught in the jaw of a demon. Neither man is anywhere to be seen. Time trickles by, easier to count by the drinks Annabelle hands me than by the ticking of hours, but there's no sign of Thomas or Gulliver. And, as I notice after perhaps my 4th or 5th cocktail, there's also no sign of Fred. Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.